So do you know that feeling when your buddy gets pulled over for going 90 in a 65? You're sure the car's about to get impounded, he's losing his license, the whole deal, but then the cop lets him go with a warning. That was basically what happened to Google this past week in one of the biggest antitrust remedy decisions in the last couple of decades. The judge said, Google, you broke antitrust law, but when it actually came time for the punishment or the penalties, it was a really light touch. There was no breakup, no consent decree like Microsoft in the 2000s, no fines, no license suspension, really just a slap on the wrist with some restrictions for future driving. This is basically exactly what I predicted would happen a year ago in a previous video, where Google would and should be allowed to keep driving because the dynamic has totally changed. When the Justice Department filed this antitrust action in 2020, generative AI didn't even exist. The AI ecosystem as we know it today didn't even exist. Artificial intelligence was one of these things that was talked about in ivory towers and some labs, but few people actually understood it or realized what potential it could have. So yeah, Google gets to keep driving now with Apple riding shotgun and AI in the driver's seat handling the navigation. And when I say this is the biggest antitrust decision in recent decades, I'm not just talking about Google here. I'm talking also about Meta, Apple, and Amazon. All three of these big tech companies have antitrust cases pending before them. I'm also talking about startups and the entire AI ecosystem. So let's get into this and break it down. So here are first the big takeaways of Google's fate. There will be no breakup of Chrome, the Android operating system, YouTube, or any other Google properties. There's also no consent decree like Microsoft had, which hamstrung them in the 2000s, where they missed out not only on social media and that whole wave, but more importantly on mobile. And guess who benefited the most from that? Google, with Android stepping into mobile where Microsoft had previously dominated operating systems. What Google is facing are some narrow restrictions. So they're no longer able to make exclusivity agreements with companies like Apple, although that Apple contract still stays in place, where Google pays Apple for traffic and they spend $20 billion a year on it, but in return they get billions of users per day. So while Google can't enter into or force exclusivity deals upon companies to make their search the only option, they can still have an arrangement where they're the default setting, but they also then need to share data with competitors on search. That doesn't mean they need to go into very specific detail about, say, the quality of a specific web page, but they need to give search data to certain competitors. Overall, though, these are very minor in terms of what could have happened to Google. So this is a huge win for the company. I mentioned the deal with Apple, which is huge for both Apple and Google. But here's the really wild part. This case opens the door for Google to deepen its relationship, not only with Apple, but with any other partner that it wants to do business with, especially in the AI space. What if, for example, Apple licenses Google's Gemini AI product into the iPhone ecosystem the same way that it already does with Google Search? Now, instead of a company like Perplexity having an upper hand on Google, who is going through antitrust litigation, Google is now maybe a little more free to make that type of deal where Gemini can now replace or be added onto Google Search in the Safari web browser on the iPhone. Apple would still get billions, Google would still get distribution, if not more so, and the AI race shifts overnight. But the good thing is that the Perplexities of the world can still compete with Google now, and they can compete on a little more of a level playing field. They may not have the financial backing that a company like Google does, but if they're a little more nimble and can offer a better product and a better marriage with Apple, then Apple might still go with them. Big tech is definitely celebrating this decision. Meta, Amazon, and Apple may not come out and say it, but they are popping champagne all over the valley with this decision being finalized. Meta is currently facing an FTC lawsuit over its ownership of Instagram and WhatsApp. Amazon's battling over its marketplace practices. Keep an eye on that one though, because I think this is the strongest antitrust case the government has against any of these companies. And Apple just got sued over the App Store and iOS. All three of those tech firms were worried they would get Microsofted. I'm trying to turn it into a verb. Basically, forced divestiture or harsh remedies, a consent decree, or the like. But Judge Meta's ruling, not Meta the company, Meta the judge, it sends this clear message. Unless regulators find some smoking gun email demonstrating anti-competitive intent, these firms are likely not going to be facing harsh remedies of divestiture, consent decrees, or the like. Remember that Microsoft case from the 2000s? There were damning emails in the Microsoft discovery where they said things like, we need to cut off Netscape's air supply. There was no such evidence in the Google case or Apple or in the Meta case, really. Amazon, though, they might be borderline. At this point, with the AI race going full steam ahead, judges are reluctant to take swift legal action that would break up companies. So expect remedies, if any, to be more narrowly tailored, more behavioral tweaks in nature, not structural changes. Using a scalpel, not a sledgehammer. When you look at the startup and AI ecosystem following this ruling, the results are a little more of a mixed bag. Google does get to keep its Apple deal, but it can't lock the door behind it anymore. No more exclusivity, so that is good news in a way for Perplexity and Anthropic and any of the other startup AI firms. They can certainly get their foot in the door if they can build a better product, but there's still the 900-pound gorilla in the room with Google. But here's the sleeper takeaway that I don't think enough people are focused on, and that's the mergers and acquisitions landscape could also change as a result of this. If regulators see how lenient courts are going to be on the big tech firms, they might be less willing to come after companies harder in the mergers and acquisitions space, as Lina Khan was doing for the last few years. The courts are leaning towards a more hands-off approach, especially when it comes to artificial intelligence and especially for American firms. So startups may find it easier now to sell to the bigger platforms, especially if those deals expand customer choice. So when we're looking at the road ahead now, what's next? Google will likely appeal the monopolization finding and maybe even the remedies, even though I'd be cautious doing that because they probably got the best case scenario given how harsh the original ruling was from Judge Meta. The DOJ may also appeal the remedies, but honestly, I don't really see this litigation dragging out for too much longer. Because if you look at the DOJ's own website following this Google verdict, they were celebrating. Both sides kind of got what they needed here. The DOJ can claim a win, saying that they checked big tech and they can point to the new restrictions on Google as being wins. And Google got a win too by not facing the harshest remedies that were available. The judge made this very clear, and I thought this was an excellent example of judicial restraint here, where he made it clear that the real battle here is not in the courtroom. It's on the AI playing field. Google now has a clear, unshackled path to double down on products like Gemini. They can also strike new licensing deals and pump billions more into infrastructure to improve their AI offerings. This allows them to fully compete with the likes of OpenAI and Anthropic, something that Microsoft was not able to do at the dawn of mobile and social media because they were mired in antitrust litigation for decades. So that's where we are, folks. Google is in the game. They are in the driver's seat. Apple's riding shotgun and AI is behind the steering wheel and running the navigation. Regulators may have given a warning for aggressive driving, but the Google car is very much on the road. And yeah, the road looks smoother now. Less barriers, no potholes in sight. But here's the thing, just because regulators aren't patrolling as aggressively doesn't mean they should take their eyes off the road. Because in tech, and especially now in AI, the next sharp turn could come out of nowhere. Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe and check the link in the description below for my newsletter, where we go even deeper than we do in these videos. So for the full analysis, become a subscriber today, and I'll look forward to seeing you on the next one. Safe driving out there.